Welcome back, boxing fans. The weekend is here. I've already paid for my DAZN pay-per-view fight with Ryan Garcia and Devin Haney. That's why I like DAZN, because DAZN makes it easy for me to watch boxing. And because of that, obviously, I'm a happy man. I can watch it on my big screen TV, go live on Saturday night with you guys, jump in and join, and let's watch it together. But that's the great thing about DAZN. That's why I was hoping everything would go on DAZN. Right now, we have Golden Boy, we have Matchroom. Of course, we have the fights with Turki Ali Sheik as well that are showcasing. We have some other fights that are between other promotional companies mixing together that actually are working out that way. So, perfect. From what I hear, the Canelo Alvarez Munguia fight is also going to be on DAZN. If that's the case, that's fire. It's perfect for me. I just wish PBC would have just signed with DAZN right out the gate. That would have been perfecto. But you can't always get what you want, but hopefully you get what you need. So let's get to this. So obviously the hype is building up. The Ryan Garcia, Devin Haney back and forth, horsehair gloves, Haney struggling to make weight. The whole Ryan Garcia is getting in Devin Haney's head. All this stuff is really heating up. And I think overall, and I did a short video earlier today just promoting this fight a little bit more, I definitely think that this is going to do pretty good pay-per-view numbers. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's pushing that million pay-per-view mark. It might not get over that, but let's say 800 to 850, which is phenomenal. If this fight with Devin Haney and Ryan Garcia does that, for fucking Devin Haney, that is the best thing that could happen to his career, really, because it definitely showcases him and elevates him to a whole new level. And I know people don't want to give Ryan Garcia any credit for the success of these pay-per-views, which boggles my mind, right? Somebody literally in the comment section yesterday of my video, and not one thing did I say was anti-anybody. And I wasn't fanboying for Ryan Garcia. If anything, I mean, I've been really anti-Ryan Garcia over the last month because of his antics and fucking mental type of behavior, which is just hard to fucking take. Maybe young people are into it, but as an older man, I watch that and I'm just like, fuck, man, get fucked. Get over it. Please stop. We don't want to hear anymore. Just shut up and train, right? Like, I watch boxing, not to listen to fucking boxers on social media. Boxers are not the most intelligent, not the most interesting individuals to listen to. I mean, and that could be said for most sports people. Sure, there's the odd person that stands out and is different, but the majority of them, they are skilled in a particular sport. They're not skilled in presentation, right? For the most part. Obviously, there's always exceptions. But let's get to this. Obviously, Muhammad Ali, not the most educated guy, but charismatic and great in front of a camera. So let me just open this. There we go. So one day out, Haney, Garcia, live on DAZN worldwide. This is perfect. Excellent. Oh, I forgot. Let me adjust something. There we go. So let's get straight to it. I saw people were pretty critical of the undercard. And when you hear boxing fans really be critical of undercards, you can tell probably what they're doing is capping for another promotional company, because generally that's what happens, right? Which is ridiculous that you need to do that. Obviously, for a pay-per-view, yes, we would like to make sure that pay-per-view cards are good, because otherwise, is it really worth spending $80 for the pay-per-view card? So let's take a look at this one. And at this point, I'm always expecting an underwhelming pay-per-view card. That's normally what we get. It's very exceptional to get a great pay-per-view card that's deep with really competitive matchups and very interesting. And it doesn't even have to be name opponents. It's just matchups, matchmaking. But let's look at this. So we got Arnold Barboza against Sean McComb. Barboza 29-0, McComb 18-1. Obviously, this is somehow the co-main event. As far as the fight, I think it's a good fight. But being a co-main event on a pay-per-view with no world title on the line, that's a little underwhelming. Obviously, at this point, you would hope that the fight would be for a world title. So on a pay-per-view, you'd at least have two world title fights. And it's not like they couldn't have done that, right? But they didn't. And so that's a little disappointing. Obviously, Barboza was also supposed to be the backup opponent in case Ryan Garcia pulled out. If they would have tried to do a Barboza Devin Haney pay-per-view, that would have been very unfortunate for Haney, because the numbers would have been very unsuccessful. It would have been far closer to the Regis Prograis numbers, which were very disappointing. And Regis Prograis had more name recognition than Barboza. So what would that tell you? And then who would be the co-main event if that was the case? So luckily, Ryan Garcia is there. The fight's going through. So we're getting what we're getting. As far as Barboza, we know he's one of the top contenders at 140 pounds. He's been pushing for a Lopez fight for years, but obviously it hasn't panned out. And so obviously he just wants to stay busy, keep himself relevant, and hope that one of these big fights, one of these world title fights, falls into his lap. And potentially him against Devin Haney as an opponent could be a possible fight, depending on what happens to the other champions in the division. If Cruz, Lopez, and Matias go in different directions, then Haney is going to have to find another opponent. Potentially, Barboza is an opponent. We also know Sandor Martin is potentially his WBC mandatory. So he does have some opponents, not necessarily big name opponents. They're going to make huge events, but better to stay busy than fucking just continue to chase big name fights that never happen, right? That's my take on fights. I would be more happy to see Devin Haney fight 3 times this year. Fight Ryan Garcia, then fight Barboza, then fight Sandor Martin. And people would say, well, he didn't fight Lopez or Subriel Matias or Tank Davis. Yeah, okay. But the reality is those fighters probably aren't rushing to fight him either. So the truth is, having 3 fights against quality opposition is great. He's young. Let's make sure he stays busy, not gets into all this fucking bullshit that we've had to deal with for far too long. But yeah, then of course the next fight on the card is Bek Melikuziev. Obviously, we know Bek Melikuziev, one of the Uzbekistani fighters, was getting tons of praise, an Olympic silver medalist in 2016. He was really making a lot of noise. But then, of course, he got knocked out, caught with a great counter punch by Rosado. And that kind of exposed him, right? Because now the bully got bullied. So you had to see how is he going to adapt and what's he going to do coming back. He's come back with some fights, and now he's fighting this guy, Dimbombe, who I'm not familiar with, Pierre Dimbombe, who is 22-0-1. So obviously he's a very experienced fighter, but he's not a fighter that I've ever seen fight. So I'm not sure what he really brings to the table. But for a guy like Melikuziev, who's only had 14 professional fights, at least he's fighting a very experienced fighter. And hopefully that guy can give him some rounds. And we can see more from Bek Melikuziev because he seemed pretty one-dimensional. And when his one dimension isn't working, he's pretty ineffective. So he's definitely going to have to continue to improve. I definitely think the trainer he works with and Madrimov works with, I can't remember his name, California trainer. I definitely think those guys are pretty limited, just in my opinion. You may disagree, but I'm never overly impressed with those trainers and the kind of results they get from their fighters. But maybe that's just me. Then we get to John Scrappy Ramirez, a very exciting fighter, smaller weight fighter, a guy who, currently 13-0 is starting to get more and more press. Obviously, he's in social media as well. And at Superfly, there's a lot of potentially big names, maybe a big Bam Rodriguez fight down the road, right? He's going to be fighting David Jimenez, an experienced fighter, 15-1, and this is for the interim WBA super flyweight title. And we know right now the super flyweight champion for the WBA is Kazuto Ioka, who has a fight scheduled, which I'll talk about a little later. And from what was being reported, John Scrappy Ramirez was supposed to be his mandatory getting that fight. But for whatever reason, that fight has fallen through. Maybe just because Ioka had another fight already scheduled and the WBA was happy to accommodate him. And maybe this means John Ramirez, if he gets past David Jimenez, will become the interim champion, leading him into that fight with Ioka. And that's fine. A guy like Scrappy Ramirez, he's not a huge name. He's building up. So he, like I said with Haney, needs to stay busy, needs to get in the ring, stay relevant. And then when he does get a fight with Ioka, people are going to be more familiar with him. And then if he beats him, maybe then we could get him in unification with a Bam Rodriguez, which would be a huge fight in America, especially for the 115-pound weight class. We also have Charles Conwell, who I thought I heard just signed with Golden Boy. That's what I heard. I could be wrong. He's going to be fighting Nathaniel Gallimore. Gallimore is a tough, resilient fighter, 22-7. Conwell, 18-0. A very exciting American fighter. But he's also had to deal with a lot of inactivity, which hasn't been great, obviously, for his development. Conwell, undefeated, former Team USA pedigree, but on his resume, and will be looking to impress on his debut with Golden Boy. Yes, his debut against Gallimore, who has 1-4 in his last 5 fights. That tells you everything you need to know. This is really a shot version of Gallimore. Obviously, Oscar De La Hoya and Golden Boy are giving him a freebie in his first fight with them, which is pretty normal when you sign with a new promoter. Usually the first fight they give you is kind of just a lob so you can get a home run. And based on that, build up your name, get active, build up your confidence, and then they'll progressively move you to bigger and better fights forward. So far, the fights we found are all good fights, not terrible fights. But none of these are the kind of fights that are really going to get anyone to go to this event early. Conwell, an American that the majority of YouTube Americans don't even talk about. Even the guys that try to highlight Black American fighters, they never highlight him. John Scrappy Ramirez, obviously, he doesn't get that much attention. I think he's Puerto Rican. I could be wrong. Excuse me if I am. Bek Malakuziev, obviously Uzbekistanian. So in America, he's going to get very little love from the majority of these YouTube channels because he just doesn't tick the boxes that they look for. And then, of course, Arnold Barboza. Obviously, the Mexican-American fan base will be interested in watching him. And that's probably why that fight is the co-main event. So overall, I mean, as a hardcore boxing fan like myself, I'm intrigued by this matchup. I'm happy to see Conwell, Bek, Barboza, and John Ramirez get fights and stay busy. But I would agree that this is not a great pay-per-view card. And luckily, I'm a boxing fan, so I paid my pay-per-view, and I'm going to watch all these fights. Well, of course, I would have loved a better card. I'm satisfied to at least have an entertaining card on big screen TV that I can enjoy this weekend and enjoy it with you. So make sure you jump in and join me if you are free. This is the fight I was talking about. Obviously, a unification fight. Unification trumps mandatory, which is why Scrappy Ramirez is fighting Jimenez. Kazuto Ioka, a 4-weight world champion, who many people over the last 5-6 years have had as a pound-for-pound fighter from time to time, depending on fights he was coming off of and how good he was looking at that time. He's going to be in with Fernando Daniel Martinez, who was part of the PBC, and I'm not sure if he still is or not. This fight's getting done. So if that is the PBC working with, DAZN to make this fight, great. Hopefully we can get more of that, especially in a situation like this for unification. Argentinian fighter Fernando Martinez is an energizer bunny, and this could be a very difficult fight for Ioka. We saw Bam Rodriguez's brother give Ioka a real tough fight the first time around, and he's a very similar fighter, very active, throws a ton of punches, nonstop throwing, and he's a little taller and a little longer. So he's got a little bit of range and height advantage over Ioka, whereas Ioka is going to be able to use a little bit of height and reach advantage over Martinez. Not much of a reach advantage, only a half an inch, but obviously 2.5 inches taller. For Ioka, he's a very skilled fighter, a technician, very accurate punches, not wide, but very straight shots down the middle, a great body puncher, very good educated jab. And what he is mostly a counter puncher. back in the day, I compared him a lot to Canelo Alvarez. Obviously, Canelo Alvarez has changed his style over the last few years, whereas Ioka is still a similar fighter, but obviously he's a little older and not as active or as aggressive as he once was. It's going to be interesting to see how he deals with Martinez. Luckily, coming off of 2 fights against Bam's brother, he's been in with a similar type of opponent. And so hopefully that means he's going to be sharp, accurate, and comfortable with nonstop pressure. For Martinez, he's not the hardest puncher, but he's just relentless, relentless. And if you saw his 2 fights with the Filipino champion, it escapes my mind. What's his name? Yeah, if you watch smaller boxing, he just lost recently. You know who I mean. But obviously, those 2 fights, Martinez was was all over him. Never gave him a minute to compose himself. Outworked him from the first round to the end. Then, of course, in the rematch, just did it even more convincingly. So I'm a big Ioka fan. I think Ioka is obviously the much better fighter, but he's also the much older fighter. And stylistically, pressure can bust the pipes. And it'll be interesting to see if Martinez pressure can really get to Ioka. So this could be one of the best fights of 2024, July 7th, 2024, Tokyo, Japan. So obviously we're getting some big events out of Japan. This is just another one of those. If you guys are on X or Twitter, as it used to be called, you guys are familiar with Artman. He obviously has been on Ring IQ quite a few times. And in those videos, Ring IQ tore him to shreds because of his bad takes. And yes, bad takes are what this guy sort of lives on. So somebody put this out there just to mock him, talking about his picks and how wrong he has been in 2023. And that's the irony in a situation like this. A guy like this with such a big mouth, strong opinions, but consistently proven wrong again and again and again and again and again. So I just wanted to go over these fights and see what my prediction was like compared to his. So let's go down this and you can think about what you predicted. So obviously Fury Wilder 3. This was a no-brainer. We saw how Fury dominated and destroyed Wilder in the second fight. We knew that he was going to do the same thing in the third fight. And there was very little a one-dimensional Wilder was going to be able to do with that opponent outside of hopefully landing a big punch. Wilder had a little bit more success in landing a punch, but at the end of the day, it was still the physically bigger fighter, physically tiring on him, pushing him around, beating him down, and gradually, just overcoming and overwhelming him and getting a very convincing knockout in that fight. So that was an easy pick. I never thought twice about who I thought was going to win that fight. Then, of course, Canelo versus Plant. I never felt that Plant was going to win, but I did see obviously a lot of Canelo haters pushing for Plant. He's a slick boxer. At one time, people had him on their pound-for-pound lists, Champ Side Boxing and many others. And people were saying that Plant was the best fighter at 168, better than David Benavidez, right, John Boxing? But of course, once this fight was scheduled, all of a sudden now many of these people no longer really supported Plant. And a lot of them felt that this was a bit of a cherry pick and that Canelo was only fighting Caucasian fighters. Ironic, right? Ironic that no matter what he does, he gets criticized for. Yet when Andre Ward does the same thing, people praise him for his resume. But I wasn't shocked or surprised that Canelo beat Plant. I knew Plant would be effective early on. He's a good boxer, younger, faster, longer, and he did have some success. But at the end, the better fighter won. Next, we had Joshua versus Usyk. I'm an AJ fan, and obviously I was rooting for AJ in the first and the second fights. So this one, I am wrong because obviously I was rooting for AJ. But at the same time, I did predict that Usyk would win, right? Because I was just confident that Usyk was a better boxer and would outbox Anthony Joshua. The second fight, I felt that AJ maybe would win that fight, but at the same time, I did favor Usyk. But at the same time, I have to support my fighter. But when you make a prediction, you need to be honest, look at the style, and think, how is AJ, specifically if he's trying to box against Usyk, going to win? When I predicted AJ winning, I predicted that he'd be much more aggressive, throwing kind of the jab that Crawford was throwing against Spence, a hard, aggressive jab, right? And if AJ would have used that kind of jab against Usyk, I feel he would have beat him. But unfortunately, stylistically, he came in wrong. He did what Canelo did against Floyd Mayweather. He tried to fight Floyd's fight. He tried to outskill the skilled fighter. And that just makes no fucking sense. So you can mark me down wrong for that one. Then, of course, Crawford versus Porter, no problem. I had Crawford winning this fight, fucking no problem. No problem at all. Porter is a good fighter, but he loses to every top-level fighter he ever faced. Beterbiev Brown, another fight that was easy to predict. Brown gave a good fight, obviously dirty and uses his head a lot, opened up a big cut on Beterbiev's head like he did with what's his face, the Swedish fighter from Mayweather's gym as well. But at the end of the day, Beterbiev is just the better fighter, the more hungry fighter, and the harder puncher. Ended up getting rid of Brown in what was a very good, exciting fight. Inui Fulton, oh, come on. We already went through all this. All these people that were picking Fulton specifically because he was black. That's all. Not because he had a better resume. Not because, he'd done more in the ring than Inui had. People criticized Inui because he struggled with Donaire. Well, Fulton struggled with Figueroa. Many people feel Figueroa won that fight. So, there was enough criticism to go around for both fighters. The difference is Inui had beaten tons of world champions. Fulton didn't have that deep of a resume. He hadn't fought that many elite fighters, right? Even though he did have a solid resume. And that's why people thought it was going to be a very good fight. But, it's hard to pick against Inui. Then Crawford Spence, Crawford all day. From 5 years ago to the fight, I always supported Crawford. And not because I hate the PBC and I hate Errol Spence. I just feel Crawford is a much better fighter, more versatile, can adjust. Spence is much more one-dimensional. He's more of a hunter, jab, and then attack. Crawford can fight in, he can fight out, he can switch up. Crawford is just a better fighter, right? And that was proven on this night. Canelo Charlo, at this point, who was picking Charlo? People picking Charlo were only picking him because he was black. And they hoped he would win. But in reality, a guy coming up two weight divisions who hadn't really been in the ring with an elite fighter in his career. Who's the most elite fighter Charlo has been in with? Austin Trout. Well, Canelo's the guy that beat Austin Trout first. Outside of Austin Trout, what elite fighters had Charlo beaten? Tony Harrison? I mean, come on. Castano? Like, you just got to be honest with yourself. And this isn't hating on Charlo. You fight who's in front of you. But the reality is Canelo's resume is way better. The opposition he's been in with is way better. It's not even comparable. Charlo looked great against good opponents. Canelo looked great against fucking great opponents. So at this point, especially up in weight, it was pretty obvious that Canelo was going to win. Wilder versus Parker. This fight obviously was a tough pick. I was leaning towards Parker because Parker had been far more active going into that fight. He'd fought, I think, 3 times over the last 15, 16 months, whereas Wilder had a 1-round fight against Robert Helenius after getting knocked out in back-to-back fights. So I was picking Parker to win. But obviously you can't look past Wilder because his power is unfathomable. All he has to do is land one shot and everything can be over. But really, out of all these fights, the only one I predicted wrong was AJ versus Usyk. And that's what happens when you support a fighter and you make predictions based on your support of a fighter and not really on the overall skill set and intangibles. Let's put it that way. Because intangibles obviously do matter. But of course, Artman, who, let's see, black fighter, Caleb Plant, a PBC pro fighter, Porter, the black fighter, AJ, the black fighter, Brown, the black fighter, Fulton, the black fighter, Spence, the black fighter, Charlo, the black fighter, Wilder, the black fighter. You can see what he's doing. He's specifically picking fighters only because of their color. And by doing that, he was wrong in every single fucking prediction, even when the prediction seemed obvious because fighters were well out of their depth. But yet he still went with those fighters. And I know Plant is not black, but when Plant was a pound for pound fighter that the PBC fanboys were supporting, putting him on Champ Side's pound for pound list, he was there, white, what do you call when you have, their token white boy. That's what he was, right? Plant was the token white boy that the PBC could support. So, that's why he was picked. If it was somebody else, not Canelo, they would have picked him anyway. Anybody but Canelo. But let's move through this and see what's next. So we've been very critical of Canelo and pound for pay-per-views and this and that. But this is another PBC pay-per-view, Canelo Alvarez, and the undercard was just announced. And people are critical of this Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia pay-per-view. But then you look at this pay-per-view. This is no better. Literally, not better at all. Mario Baros versus Maidana's brother. Maidana's brother has never fought a top 10 opponent, yet somehow he's in a WBC interim world title fight. How do you earn a world title fight when you've never fucking done anything except fucking live in your brother's shadow and get beat in 2 of your step-up fights? Let's just take a quick look at his resume, because you'll find out it's definitely not anything to get fucking excited about. And I ain't saying this to hate. I'm just putting into context. People have been really critical of the Devin Haney, Ryan Garcia pay-per-view. Some people going so far as to say they're going to boycott it. Again, with this boycott shit. How many times have we lived through this YouTube fucking era of people talking about boycotting? And primarily, it's always Showtime PBC fucking fanboys that are boycotting everybody else's pay-per-view, right? Yet these dudes really probably don't pay for any of the pay-per-views anyway. So it's kind of fucking ridiculous to even listen to them, but it is what it is. So there we go. Maidana, Fabian Maidana. Yes, his brother was good. He's not. 22-2, 16 KOs, 31 years old. Good measurements, 5'9", 72-inch reach. That's pretty good for welterweight. He lost to Jada Para, 32-2-1. He lost to Francisco Mercado, 5-1. 5-1. He lost to a guy that was 5-1 in an 8-round fucking fight. You're like 29, 30 years old, and you lose to a guy with 6 professional fights in an 8 fucking rounder. And then you go on to beat guys like Edwin Bennett, 15-3, Haleshi Rodriguez, 9-5-2, Israel Lopez, 11-4-1. And now you step in to face Mario Barrios for a WBC interim fucking title. WBC is poisoned, all these sanctioned bodies. But this is like fucking just a gimme fight. They're allowing Mario Barrios to fucking cherry pick a guy who, because of his brother, he's got the Maidana name, so maybe that will sell for, and look at this card. It's all aimed towards fucking Latino people consistently. The PBC only supports Black American fighters, yet there's not one Black American fighter on this fucking card, right? This is another narrative we hear from a lot of these people because, Mexican money isn't real. That's just a fucking fallacy. Mexican American money doesn't move boxing. Yet here's a fucking card that's only really being sold to Latino people. So, okay. I mean, at least the Ryan Garcia fight has a couple of Black American fighters on the card. And then you got Brandon Figueroa, WBC interim world title fight. I don't know why this guy's just not fighting fucking Vargas. He's fighting Jesse Magdalena. Jesse Magdalena, if I don't remember, just got fucking beat in his last fight. And now he's getting another opportunity to fight for another interim title. How the fuck does that happen? Well, it's the same as Funduro, right? People are critical of dudes getting world title fights coming off of losses like Lomachenko. But Lomachenko was in a controversial, undisputed matchup against a pound-for-pound fighter in Devin Haney. But then you're going to compare him to an Errol Spence who just got knocked the fuck out and destroyed by Bud Crawford, or Funduro who got knocked out, or a guy like Maidana who I think got knocked out. Let me just check out. I'm pretty sure Jesse Magdalena got knocked out in his last fight. Oh, maybe not. 29-2, only stopped once. So maybe it wasn't his last fight. No, okay, sorry. Raymond Ford beat his ass over 12 rounds. And prior to that, he got stopped by Isaac Dogbo, right? And so literally he lost to Raymond Ford in 2023, and now he's getting an interim world title fight with Figueroa coming off of a loss. So once again, all it is a fucking cherry pick fight to give Figueroa a WBC interim title fight. So Mario Baros maybe can inherit Bud Crawford's WBC title, and that Figueroa maybe can inherit Ray Vargas's title. I don't know. Then, of course, you have the WBA World Welterweight Championship. And is this going to be for the regular title? Because, see, it doesn't tell you. So it must be the regular title. Otherwise, I think it would say WBA Super title. Right now, the WBA Super title, who has that? Still Bud Crawford. But Stanionis obviously was going to fight Ortiz for the regular title. And I think he has the WB regular title. He won it off of Jamal James. So he's going to be fighting Mastier, this 40-year-old fucking dude that somehow the PBC has been pushing like crazy, right? This Venezuelan fighter that nobody knows who he is, but yet he continues to be put in big fights even when he had no fucking fights. Like literally, he's going to be fighting Stanionis. Unfortunately, Stanionis has been out of the ring for almost 2 fucking years. And now he's going to fight this guy who is 6-0-1. 6-0-1. 5 KOs, Venezuelan, 37 years old, right? 37 years old. And I know this guy's been fast-tracked, but Jesus Christ, man. You know, he did fight Diego Chavez in his second fight. Stopped him in 4 rounds, but that Chavez was already 5 losses deep in his career at that time. Beat Markel Fox by decision, and then had a draw against Taras Selenchuk, a Ukrainian fighter, by split decision draw. Came back, beat an old-ass Devin Alexander, who had 7 losses. Stopped him in 3 rounds. Trevon Marshall he beat, which was an up-and-coming young fighter, but untested, right? Like, the kid was 8-0. You're throwing an 8-0 young kid in with a 37-year-old guy with a long amateur pedigree. So it's kind of a mismatch. It's kind of unfortunate that they threw Trevon Marshall even in that fight. But unfortunately, he was knocked out in 2 rounds. And now he's going to be fighting Stanionis. The only positive in this fight is that Stanionis has been so inactive that might benefit Mastier, right? Because I think he just fought Marshall. When did he fight Marshall? Yeah, August 2023. So, you know, what? It's going to be April. So, you know, not bad. You know, about 8 months ago. So 8 months he's been busy. Whereas Stanionis, when was the last time he fought? Stanionis' last fight was against Butayev when he won the title, and that was 2022. Literally 2 fucking years ago to the date. 2 years ago, right? 24 months of inactivity. This dude's been fucked over by the PBC. Obviously was unfortunate because of the whole Ortiz medical situation and those fights. And also I think he had an injury as well that delayed that fight, which was really going to be a great fight between him and Ortiz. And now he's fighting Mastier. So really, this is an underwhelming fucking card. Obviously, the only benefit in this is that you could potentially have 4 Latino fighters all win some version of a title. If Mastery wins, he'd be the WBA regular champion. Figueroa and Barrios could become interim champions. Of course, Canelo or Munguia would be undisputed at 168. So it's a great card for Latino fans. Then we have this card, which is going around right now, and this is the Tank Davis card. And you know, when you look at this card, there's good names on the card, but once again, the majority of these fights are uninteresting, right? Tank Davis, Frank Martin is not a bad fight, right? Frank Martin is a solid fighter, but is he great? He's 28, 29 years old. He's never fought a top 10 fucking lightweight, This is the first top 10 lightweight he's in. So he could totally be fucking exposed in this fight. Knocked out in 3 rounds. Nobody would be surprised. And people would say, what do you expect? The guy's never been in with a fucking top fighter. The last guy he fought was a German fighter who had less than 13 professional fights, right? And many people feel he looked bad in that fight. And then you have David Benavidez, who's fighting Vostik. Vostik, who was great, but he's been retired for 4 fucking years. Literally came back against 2 bum opponents. And when I say bum, I mean bum-ass opponents. Can you pause? I'm making a video here. I don't say turn off. I say pause. What the fuck, man? What are you doing? Yeah, I want this video. I'm going to watch it. Punch Drunk's video. So, pause. Yes, confirmed. Tank Davis signed 6-fight deal. We revealed the list. So that's interesting. I'm not sure if it's a real list or he's just fabricating it. So I want to watch that because it kind of corresponds with what I'm talking about now. We know Tank Davis just signed a 6-fight deal with PBC, which, you know, probably means no Shakur, no Devin Haney, you know, no Teofimo Lopez. So who's he going to fight? Right? It'll be interesting to see. But like, you know, the PBC, if they do the same thing to him that they did for Errol Spence and line up the next 6 opponents that they have planned for him, like they did with Canelo as well, you know, chances are it's going to be fucking underwhelming. And by the time Tank Davis finishes his 6-fight deal, he's going to be fucking what, 33 years old? Going on 34? Because 6 fights is 3 years. So he has this fight now, 1 more fight, then 5 fights. He's already going to be 30. So then 33. 33. And who knows who is he going to fight on this list? And of course, it probably means the PBC is not going to work with other promotional companies to make fights, right? But hopefully they're not going to do that. But anyways, David Benavidez, top fighter, just like Tank Davis. But yet, Vostik at this point, it's a cherry pick opponent. No one really thinks Vostik is going to give David Benavidez a tough fight. And if they do, it's based on what he was 4 years before he retired, before he got knocked out and fucking sent into retirement by Better BF. Then you have Morrell, who's a late addition to this card, and I'm happy as fuck Morrell's getting a fight. But I would be so much happier if Morrell would have left the PBC to go to Matchroom. It would have been way better for his career. He's been inactive, never got a top fighter. The guy he's fighting now in Kalajis is a good opponent, but a good opponent for who? For him at this point, Kalajis isn't fucking ranked in the top 10 by any fucking sanctioning body. You know, he's a good opponent for an up-and-coming guy, but Morrell wants like big names. He's been chasing David Benavidez, right? You would think by having these 2 guys on the card together, maybe that means that's going to be next, and that would be fucking dynamite. But at the same time, we kind of hope next is Canelo Alvarez versus David Benavidez, right? Or David Benavidez versus the winner of Bivol versus Better BF. 2 better fights than Morrell. As far as Morrell versus Kalajdzic, I know he's 29-2, but he's been very inactive. He lost his 2 big fights. You know, he hasn't really been doing much over the last 4 years, right? He's just a name based on a few performances, but hasn't done anything recently. And then, of course, you have Jose Valenzuela rematch with Edwin De Los Santos. One fighter's coming off of one of the worst fights in history, De Los Santos. The other fighter's coming off of a redemption fight against a fighter that he got sort of screwed over in the first fight, came back and was far more dominant the second fight around. And I kind of feel he's going to be more dominant this fight with De Los Santos. And I would not be surprised if Valenzuela beats De Los Santos in the rematch. I know Morrell's going to win. I know Benavidez is going to win. I know Tank Davis is going to win. The only fight that has some intrigue is the Valenzuela-De Los Santos fight. And De Los Santos, based on his last performance, he's lucky he's even getting a fight. Because based on that, nobody was fucking eager to see that dude fight. But of course, this fight, there's a bit of a rivalry. He did beat and stop Valenzuela. So obviously that in itself makes this an intriguing matchup. But does this sell a pay-per-view? See, so far we have 2 PBC cards and the DAZN card, all pay-per-views. Not one of them has exceptional undercards. When you think about this and what's coming from Better BF Bivol with the 5-on-5 card, and people are critical of the Scottish fighter fighting the domestic UK dude, but that's like the 5th fight out of the fights. The other 4 fights are great. Far better than anything else we see on these because they're far more competitive. Literally, those promoters want their fighters to win so they can walk away with fucking pride saying, my stable is better. Here, we know what's going on. The promoters are literally putting their fighters in with cherry pick opponents to move them forward in the master plan that is already fucking written out for their careers. There's no spontaneity. Al Haymon and the PBC know what they want these fighters to do next. So if Benavidez doesn't fight Canelo, that's because the PBC doesn't want that fight. They're not moving him in that direction. They're moving him in a different direction. And you know that direction is not going to be towards Turki Al Sheikh's fucking offer to fight the winner of Bivol Better BF for undisputed 175. Guarantee he ain't taking that fight. Not if he stays with the PBC. And if I'm wrong, I will be the happiest wrong motherfucker on YouTube. But let's keep moving. Is that all? I thought there was more. Oh, well, there you go. So leave your comments below. What do you think about these undercards? Are you excited about the big fight this weekend? What's your prediction? Do you give Ryan Garcia any chance in hell to win that fight? Let me know in the comment section below. Thanks for watching. Peace out and enjoy your weekend, everyone. Remember